January 7th, 2025, United States. Fires ravage Los Angeles. Homes destroyed, 17 lives lost, and billions in economic damage. Less than 2 weeks later, Donald Trump, President of the United States, officially withdraws from the Paris Agreement, a global treaty to combat climate change. Have you ever stopped to think about what the world will be like in 2050? Will we be winning the battle against climate change with sustainable technology, or will we be facing irreversible disaster? Part of the world is in a constant state of contradiction. It's hard not to wonder, what will our future look like? Climate change, to quickly recap, refers to long-term shifts in Earth's temperature and weather patterns, primarily caused by human activities that emit greenhouse gases. These gases, like carbon dioxide, get trapped in the atmosphere and retain heat. But when did all of this begin? Well, the issue of CO2 emissions started way back during the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. Before that, we relied on renewable energy sources like firewood and hydropower. But the invention of the steam engine changed everything. We began burning coal on a large scale to power factories, trains, and ships. In the 20th century, oil and natural gas became dominant, driving global industrialization and exponentially increasing emissions. Although some still insist on denying the reality or attributing it solely to natural causes, the science is clear. The problem lies in human actions. Global warming is the direct result of our choices: burning fossil fuels, deforestation, intensive agriculture, uncontrolled industrialization, and even plastic pollution. And without a doubt, the major powers leading global emissions play a huge role. Each of these actions makes our planet less habitable. Believe it or not, almost 200 years ago, physicist Joseph Fourier suggested that Earth's atmosphere acted like a blanket, trapping the sun's heat and preventing it from escaping into space. Decades later, in 1856, scientist Eunice Foote conducted an experiment showing that carbon dioxide could trap heat, foreshadowing the idea that changes in air composition could affect the climate. In 1896, Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius was the first to calculate that burning fossil fuels could warm the planet, predicting that if CO2 levels doubled, global temperatures would rise significantly. In 1958, scientist Charles Keeling began measuring atmospheric CO2 levels, showing they were rising due to human activities. It took decades for the scientific community to realize he was right. Even with all these discoveries, it took over 100 years for the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to be established in 1988, with the goal of warning the world about the impacts of climate change. Today, despite overwhelming scientific evidence, we still face significant challenges in effectively addressing this crisis. However, as I mentioned in the introduction, the key to changing this scenario lies in the efficiency of governments, or rather, the lack thereof. Delayed public policies, ignored climate goals, ego, and greed for economic interests remain the biggest obstacles to reversing this crisis. Remember this part, because it sums up the main cause of the climate changes we face today, okay? But so what? Now that we know how we got here, what does the future hold? Well, looking ahead, the scenario can be divided into two major possibilities. The first and most desired, I believe, by everyone watching this video is a sustainable technological revolution. We're talking about innovations that could radically transform our relationship with the environment. Clean energy, electric cars, large-scale reforestation, carbon capture technologies, and new agricultural methods that could drastically reduce emissions. These solutions wouldn't just mitigate the damage we've already caused, but could even reverse some of the most severe consequences of climate change. But of course, technology alone isn't enough without coordinated global action. The truth is, we're still far from implementing these solutions on a large scale. Transitioning to a sustainable future requires more aggressive public policies, massive investments, and above all, a global shift in mindset. So what's the projection for 2050 if we continue on this path? Well, the United States will face severe and growing consequences. According to the IPCC, extreme heat waves could make regions like Texas, California, and Arizona nearly uninhabitable during the summer. Rising sea levels could submerge parts of Miami, New Orleans, and New York, forcing millions of people to move inland. Wildfires will become even more common, destroying vast areas of the western U.S. Water shortages will hit the South and Midwest, affecting agricultural production and driving up food prices. More powerful hurricanes could devastate coastal cities, bringing incalculable economic losses. What we can expect is a global humanitarian crisis. And folks, let's not forget that climate change affects people unequally. The most vulnerable communities, like indigenous peoples and low-income populations who contribute the least to this crisis, are the ones who suffer the most. They face more natural disasters, resource shortages, and have less access to technologies to adapt to new conditions. And the worst part? They live in countries that are among the world's largest emitters. The more we study this issue, the more infuriating it is to realize that 99% of the solution depends on the major powers, making the challenge even more urgent. Speaking of which, by withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, Donald Trump took the largest historical emitter of greenhouse gases out of the global pact, prioritizing immediate economic interests over environmental preservation and the safety of citizens. But hold on, let's look at the bright side. If the United States adopts stricter policies and heavily invests in renewable energy, they could drastically reduce emissions and mitigate the worst impacts. With an effective infrastructure plan, coastal cities could be protected against flooding. The development of new agricultural technologies could ensure food production even under extreme conditions. And transitioning to cleaner transportation would help reduce air pollution and improve the population's quality of life. What a crazy future we're heading into, right? This divide between innovation and inaction is the great challenge of our generation. In fact, this uncertainty makes many people wonder if it's even worth bringing a child into this future. And I include myself in that. Tell me in the comments what you think about all of this. Now that we understand what's at stake and the possible scenarios, will the major powers really invest heavily in clean energy and sustainability? And will developing countries have access to these technologies? The answer is maybe, but it depends on a combination of factors. We need strong global leadership committed to the future of the planet. For now, we're at a tipping point. The technologies exist, but we need action yesterday. Despite the challenges, there's still hope. Cities like Copenhagen are already implementing effective solutions, aiming to become carbon neutral. And countries like Costa Rica have made significant progress in using renewable energy, with over 98% of their electricity generated from clean sources. This shows us that yes, it's possible to move toward a more sustainable future if we take the right actions. What happens by 2050 depends on the choices we make today. What we know for sure is that none of this will happen without our action. And speaking of action, don't forget to leave your comment, subscribe for more videos like this, and see you next time.